This episode brought to you by Nomadic Research, built for the wild and forged in adversity. Somewhere between the front lines and the firelight, a vision was born. The founders of Nomadic Research spent years in the harshest environments on Earth, where grit and resilience weren't just words, but a way of life. They saw a need for gear that could handle anything, gear that wasn't just built, but built to last. From battlefields to backcountry trails, every piece of Nomadic Research gear is designed with one mission: unyielding performance for those who refuse to quit. The founders believe in patriotism, personal responsibility, and the freedom of the great outdoors, because adventure isn't just a weekend escape, it's a way of life. Born in the heart of Afghanistan, forged in adversity, and built for the wild, Nomadic Research is gear for those who go further. You can start your adventure at nomadicresearch.com. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the DTD podcast, Dynamic Tales Delivered. This week in the studio, from a dust-choked courtyard in Kabul, 4 bullets, 1 lost leg, 0 quit. Colonel Kent Solheim clawed back to Special Forces Command and built adventures for Gold Star kids. Strap in. This is war's darkest night turned into a blazing daylight. What's going on, my friend?
How you doing, brother?
Man,
That's a killer intro.
Thanks. This has been a long time in the works. A couple different people have tried to make it happen. I was supposed to be down there and meet you. Chuck Ritter had tried to set it up a long time ago. Then AJ Jackson tried to set it up. So it finally got taken care of, and I'm so glad that it is, because your story is unbelievable. Not just from the wounds that you suffered, but how you came back, and then just kind of the blaze of glory that took off after that. Because I think your career after that injury and after that happened just was, took off unbelievably. Would you agree with that?
Well, I just said I was in the right place at the right time, DJ. I got, there's some luck involved, right? And you've got good people around you. So, I'll just say I won't complain.
So let's talk about your career. We always go back to the very beginning, and we talk about, your upbringing and all of that kind of sets you towards this life of service. So let's start back then, talk about growing up, and then your enlistment. And because quite frankly, once again, you were in 2 different kind of armies from the time you enlisted until the time you got out. I believe it was 2 different kinds of armies. So let's start back with your childhood and talk about how you grew up and how you kind of found this, want for service that you have.
Yeah. So I was born in Oregon City, Oregon, which is just right outside of Portland. And my family, we moved a fair bit. Well, to be fair, kind of moved a fair bit in those early years of my life. And at 5 years old, my dad ended up working up in Canada. So we moved up to a place called Medicine Hat, Alberta. And I spent 7 years there. And then from Medicine Hat, my dad ended up with another job a little farther east in Canada in a place called London, Ontario. Everybody kind of hears about Toronto. It's a couple hours from Toronto. And I spent 8 years there, and then actually got out of high school. Truly, really didn't have a lot of direction in my life as far as what was next. And that's where I ended up joining the Army. That's when I came back to the United States, was cross the border to join the military, and then kind of the rest is history from there. But I was married a Canadian girl when I was up in Canada, brought her back with me. And so really, I spent a lot of my younger years from 5 to 22 in growing up north of us here.
So why do you think it was that you came back to the United States to join the military? You had spent, pretty much your whole life in Canada.
Yeah, that was a pretty easy decision for me. Actually, when I was trying to figure things out, at that time, I went to what is the equivalent of our state troopers up in Canada and said, hey, like to perhaps pursue a job in law enforcement. And they said, well, hey, do you have a college degree? No, I didn't have a college degree. Didn't have a lot of experience just coming out of high school. So I said, hey, probably be better you go on and get some experience. and they proposed the military, hey, either a degree or maybe some military experience. And so then I'm like, well, you know what? Let me look at the Canadian military. So I went in to see a Canadian recruiter, and they essentially said, hey, you can join the Canadian Army, but you need to denounce your U.S. citizenship. And I was like, no, that's not going to happen. Um, there was a couple other pieces to that, but I mean, honestly, those those factors of like, hey, maybe you don't have enough experience to do these other things. Here's some ways you can get some experience. Um, a lot of roads sort of led to the military. But I had grown up with the thought of perhaps serving in the military, even as a young man, so it wasn't like a super difficult decision. I think it was just, maybe the hand of Providence leading me in a certain direction that ultimately brought me back to the States and brought me back to our military.
You joined as a Cav Scout, correct?
That's right. Yeah, sure did.
So, what made you? Because how your career went on later on. What was it about the Cav Scout instead of doing infantry or forward observer or anything like that? What was it that drew you to that?
A kid that had no money and a recruiter that offered me $3,500. Like that's the truth. I remember like my dad wasn't military. I have military in my family, but I mean I didn't really have that immediate person close by me to sort of advise me through this process. Like, hey, this is maybe what you want to do, and knowing your personality, maybe you should go this direction. I didn't really have that, so it was kind of discovery learning. And so I went into the recruiter. Actually, I was going to join the Marines, which is a funny story. I was only going to join the Marines because as a young kid that saw their awesome commercials and thought their uniforms were cool. And so, they're killing dragons on TV. So I'm like, yeah, that's what I want to do. So I'm walking to go see the Marine recruiter. And this was back in 1994. And an Army recruiter, some recruiting stations, you have all the
Right.
recruiters in the same building. This is the case here. So I'm going to the Marines. And this young staff sergeant steps out. This is back in the days when Rangers were wearing black berets. He's wearing a black beret, jump boots. Don't know how he ever got away with that because he was a recruiter, not in a Ranger battalion. But he was rocking the Ranger regiment gear, and he said, "Hey, where are you going?" I said, "Well, I'm going to go join the Marines." And he asked me if I wanted to be on a ship for 6 months of the year. I was like, I do not. He said, well, hey, come on in here and talk to me. So he got me, good recruiter. And then ultimately, when it came to picking the job, I seen Cav Scout, not knowing anything about military. I'm like, oh, General Custer, Cav Scout. That's cool. And then, and we'll give you a bonus of $3,500 to take this job. I was like, where do I sign? So back at that point in my life, $3,500 was a lot of money.
Now, were you married at the time?
Yeah, I sure was. Yeah.
Oh,
I
yes.
got
That
married.
3,500 meant a lot then.
Oh yeah. Yeah. After taxes, I think it was like $2,700, but I didn't have two nickels scratched together back then. So, and married to my bride back then. And, we got married when I was 20. She was my high school sweetheart. And then, so 2 years later, at 22, I was enlisting in the Army.
That's a little older than, you hear most guys, they're 18, 19 years old. Do you think that being 22 when you went in, do you think that helped you out a little bit, just being a little more mature than the other guys that were with you?
100%. And even at 22, I still had a lot of growing up to do. Like getting out of high school, I always joked around and been like, I had like a zip code in Loserville. I was attempting to become an athlete in a sport, and realistically, I didn't have the level of talent to become a paid athlete, right? But you still have this dream. And, working in a bicycle store retail to make ends meet, which you don't make ends meet doing. So, yeah, if it had not been for the military to like help, but to answer your question, I was perhaps a little bit more mature And if I joined the Army at 17 or 18, I believe maybe my experience would have been a little bit different. I don't know, but yeah, I think for me, I was 22 was good, you know, but like I say, I wouldn't say I had my life all pulled together at 22 years old,
But
at all.
yeah, but within 5 years, you're already commissioned through ROTC.
Yeah, actually, it was OCS, but I yeah, the army clicked for me. Like when I was in basic training, it clicked, and I was like, yep, um, I can I can I can buy into this. And so I think that's where I sort of really got an azimuth in life. My first azimuth in life was getting to the military, getting the structure, getting the discipline, the competition of it, all the things that just make basic training. Uh, those were really great ingredients in my recipe. And so, yeah, I, really thankful for the military. I've had ups and downs through my time in service, but no regrets. No regrets for me. Um, that's what the young Kent needed.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Do you think that there's a touch point? You know, you say that coming into the military, basic training, and all of that kind of stuff, but do you think there was one specific touch point that gave you that azimuth?
No, you know, like it's funny. I don't consider myself a person that has like a super memory, but I distinctly remember being in basic training and just everything about it seemed to there was some congruency with who I was and what I was doing in the military and what we were doing. And um, like it, for lack of a better way to say it, it just felt really right for me. And I was like, this is, you know, I feel like I'm where I should be. Um, and I, you know, throughout my military career, there were times when I was doing things and I said, this isn't enough for me. And so if I can't find something more, I'll probably pull my ripcord and go to do something else. But there always was something else that kept me around. Um, but it started like I got the I got the bug in basic training.
So do you think that switch that you're talking about, where you're always having to find something else, is that why you think you went from enlisted to officer? I mean, because you did it pretty
Yeah, it
quickly.
was. It definitely was. I I really wanted to. I bought into this idea of leadership in the military. When I even at basic training, I really bought into this idea, and I think coming out of basic training and then going to a regular Army unit and observing other leaders around me, and then understanding like who does what and where do I want to be, and that drove me to say, well, I think I think I'd like to be an officer. I At that young juncture in my career, I looked at the officers and said, okay, this is the commander. Um, and that's something I want to do. Not from a perspective of like, I want to, I want everybody to call attention when I walk in the room. Not that stuff, but actually like, hey, I want to lead troops, and if we ever go to war, I want to lead troops. I want to, I want to, I don't say this, what I'm about to say, like patting myself on the back. We just all know ourselves. And I felt like I had some strengths there that, that I could use. Um, Plenty of weaknesses. That just happened to be an area I thought like the Army's taught me some good things, and I wanted to do it at what I perceived to be the highest level in the Army, and that was officer. So that's why I pursued it. It wasn't about money. It wasn't
What
about
was there a
anything.
particular officer?
Here's what's crazy. In my formidable years, I think I learned more about what I didn't want to do from some of the officers and NCOs I worked with than when ones that stood out. Right, like there was certainly some amazing company grade officers, field grade officers. I was as a private first class I ended up driving for the 3 Corps commander, who at the time was General Thomas Schwartz. And just an incredible general officer who took time to get to know his driver, right? Like his private. And so guys like that really stood out as, here's a Vietnam vet, CIB, Ranger, Purple Heart, combat leader, was a platoon leader in Vietnam. And so he's a guy I think of right away that stood out and made a huge impression on me. But there was also a bunch of other officers and NCOs. I'm like, I also know what I don't want to be, So take notes. I always say you can learn from good and bad. You can learn from anybody. They don't have to be good to learn from them. They'll teach you a lesson too, right? Like teach you what not to do.
Well, and at this time, from when you enlisted, we're kind of at a peacetime army. There's stuff going on around the world. There's some hot spots around the world, but we're more than not, we're a peacetime army. Were you worried because you talked about, always needing that next thing that, hey, after 5 years, 6 years that you're in, I might never see combat. I may never see the full extent of this job. Was that ever a concern on you?
I think that's one of the factors that drove me to go to Special Forces Assessment Selection. Every time I tried something new in the Army, I didn't come out of it fully satisfied, still really hungry, so like young private, tried really hard, did some things as a private, and then became a young NCO, then became a young officer. And every step I'm like, well, I'm still, that itch has still not been scratched. And then back in those days, you didn't have social media, of course, and all that stuff. So like Special Forces would advertise with a pamphlet in the PX. And so I picked up the pamphlet, and I still remember seeing a picture of there was a team sergeant that talked about, my career, I traveled all over the world, worked with host nation forces, learned different languages, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, man, that sounds pretty awesome. So even if we don't find ourselves in war, here's an opportunity to just go and do something outside of there. Like a deployment back in the 90s was like, I'm going to NTC. You're going to be gone 30 days. Oh my gosh. Like that's crazy. And wait till global war on terror and people were gone 15 months and over and over and over and over again. We redefined what being gone was. But in the Army I was in, when I first came in, it was just, Korea was a big deal. That was a 1 year away. And so anyway, I saw the pamphlet, I drank the Kool-Aid, and said, I want to go and travel around the world and actually do this job for real. Even if it's just training host nation forces or partnering with other countries. And so that was a thing that, another itch I wanted to scratch, and thought, okay, maybe this is it. So that's what drove me to go to selection. And I honestly don't think I would have stayed in the Army if I hadn't been, selected to go Special Forces. But I keep talking about scratching the itch. That was finally where I was like, all right, I found a place where I'm every day I come to work, I'm satisfied.
So when you do that and you go to Special Forces qualification, because I remember what you're saying. Like I remember like the 160th came, Delta came when I was over in Hawaii, and they just had like a video. They called everyone into the auditorium and they played like a video, or they had a meeting over at the aviation unit and they played a video and stuff. So it wasn't, no one really knew about this stuff back then, I don't think. They knew about the Green Berets and stuff, but all of these other kind of units were, unless you went to those briefings, you really never heard about stuff like this. So it's interesting to hear that you just picked up a pamphlet and you were like, hey, I'm already here, and this guy seems like he has a better job than me, so let me go do that. And it kind of seems like that's been the way you've looked at your whole career, like it's always seeking something better to either better yourself or better the people around you.
That's a way to put it. and of course there's some selfishness in that too, right? Where you're
Of
like, man,
course.
I want to do cool stuff. I want to go to cool schools. I want to be around cool people. And that's the younger side of you that, and then when you get older, you realize different things make you tick. Um, but yeah, like no kidding. I mean, I really was just like everybody else trying to find uh, that thing that you go, man, this is my calling. Like this is what I feel like I'm supposed to do. Uh, and so I don't think everybody finds that in life, and I feel blessed that I feel like I found something. It's not to say any of us couldn't do 20 things and we'd be happy, but hey, find one of those 20 things. I think I got lucky. I think I found one of my 20, you know?
So I'll ask you again for this: when you go through SFAS, is there a touch point in there where now I've hit it? This is what I'm doing. I mean, we've talked about you realize that this is what you wanted to do, but was there a specific instance there where you realized it?
Yeah, I think so. I think just looking around, I showed up to selection. I'd never met a Green Beret. I didn't, the first time I really saw one was, I remember I was at Fort Knox as a young guy, and a SF guy was there and walking through the clothing and sale. And I'm like, oh, wow, look at that. That's really cool. But other than that, no encounters with Green Berets, never stationed anywhere that had Green Berets. I just showed up cold, like, okay, here's your orders. Be at this, here's your, where's you show up, and here's your packing list. So I remember getting there and going, these SF guys are a little different from what I'm used to as far as the NCOs I encountered. And I mean that in a positive way. And then going to selection, I enjoyed the challenges that were there. Um, I enjoyed some of I don't know what the right word is, but an environment where you're tested on your ability to self motivate and to solve your own problems, and to, if you're out on a land nav course by yourself in the dark, and it's tempting to lay down and go to sleep, or are you going to ruck up and find your points and make it back that night? And I mean, it's no secret that's part of selection, is what kind of guy are you. So I liked the tests there. It was an opportunity to test yourself, see what kind of metal you're made of. And so, yeah, kind of like basic training. I woke up hungry at every day at SFAS, and felt like, okay, here's another team I can be on and be pretty happy. So yeah, I felt that early on in selection.
When did you feel your biggest challenge?
Like in selection, you mean?
Yeah.
Ooh. Um everybody has a hard day, right? There was a couple hard days where you question what you're doing, and there's you know, still small voice that says, like, just tap. Um, and I had those days just like everybody else. But what one I had really prepared for selection, really poured myself into getting ready for it. So I think that paid off, just like anybody, right? Commit to something, train for it, focus on it, get yourself as ready as you can be, and then let the cards fall where they may. But um, yeah, looking back on that experience, it was SFAS was a positive one for me. Taught me a lot about myself. And so aside from, I feel sorry for myself today because my feet hurt or my back hurts or whatever. Uh, that was probably the worst of it.
Well, and that's why I ask you a challenge, because the way you talk about it, and the way you talk about your whole career, is you're just kind of a happy guy to be there. And so it almost sounds like, I know it's not true, but like there's not a challenge,
Well,
that it doesn't get hard.
I fooled you then.
Okay.
Uh, I think, yeah, I definitely were challenged by all these events, but I think I'm fortunate in that, I said about basic training where it just sort of works with your personality. I kind of feel like that's selection, those kind of things. Just I'm stumbling to find the right words, but uh, they were definitely challenging. But I think I was just really driven, really, really driven to succeed. Like, I can't fail at this. You can't go to Ranger school. Failing is not an option. Failing selection is not an option. And whether you get selected or not, that's not my choice. The choice I have is to go there and just lay it all out on the line and give every ounce of everything I have, and then let somebody else select and go, yeah, you're the right guy, or hey, man, thanks for trying, but you're just not the right guy. But I think I really had that attitude. And DJ, I'll tell you, man, I'm not an overconfident, but I am not in the Kent fan club as far as believing I can do everything. I'm actually the opposite. I think for me, that's really what's driven me. Uh, people say, and I find it in myself, I'll outwork you. I'm going to outwork you, but I'm going to outwork you because I just don't have a lot of confidence in myself enough to go like, yeah, man, I'm just going to show up to this and we're going to be good. I'm going to do the opposite. I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to show up, but I'm certainly going to go there as ready as I can be if I get the opportunity to prepare for something. And that's carried me in life. And as an older man now, like, talking to others, I think if you can adopt that mentality of just, you know, it's important to have an attitude to win and to be successful, but it's more important to have an attitude to prepare. Because if you can have that attitude, if you can be hungry about what you're doing and you can be all in, in a mindset to go and do something, um, then oftentimes more than not, winning will follow. But be hungry about the preparation.
So how do you face it when the victory doesn't follow?
I had that first experience in basic training. It's probably one of the most important lessons in my young life. I They had this thing back then. It was called, I'm trying to remember even what it was called, but it was Excellence in Cavalry, I think. And I had done pretty well in basic training. Was and and if you did well in this through basic training, you were given the opportunity to promote from private to private first class. I was just at E1, and show up to your unit, and then you're supposed to fast track as a young soldier. And so I had done well in everything that was required to make it into this program, but you had to go to a board, just like a regular military board, but it was a bunch of drill sergeants. And I went into that board and I imploded. Like, I could not have done worse. And, looking back on that experience in my life, I was like, man, no, I guess I'd never really sat in front of somebody and done like a job interview or any sort of thing in that kind of setting. And I went in and woefully unprepared, not because I didn't try to learn all the information or whatever, but I don't know. I think I just went in with some sensory overload as a young guy that had not experienced that kind of setting. And they're like, no, you didn't get selected for this program. And that was a really difficult time for me to process that. Like, that was a failure in life. But that failure never left me. It drove me. I ended up being the 3-Corps Soldier of the Year, which is like where you go to boards, right? Like,
Right. A
but I was
lot
like,
of
you know
boards.
what? Yeah, I'm like, I did so poorly on this that I'm not going to let it defeat me. So I'm actually going to go back and I'm going to get good at this. So that's what I did. I started becoming a board nerd and just going to boards and ended up winning the 3-Corps level. And so it became an important lesson in my life as a young person to failures are going to happen. Failures are where you learn. Failures will drive you. failures will drive you more than winning, I think. And 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 believe me, through my career, I've had other iterations of failure, but oddly enough, I'll reflect back on. There's a couple that I just reflect back on and go, yeah, you probably didn't handle that right. Um, but those things made you better. And so really thankful for those failures. I've shared that story a lot of time to other young bucks who have, maybe they haven't had a lot of failures in their life, and then they experience one, and it's this cataclysmic event, and you're like, nah, really, it's not that bad, man. Instead, what can you learn from this, and how can you get better? So, yeah, I I gave you a long answer to your question, but I did not handle failure well. Beat myself up, but drove me to do other things.
Well, I almost wonder if that first failure, that board, was because of what you said about yourself, that you're not the biggest in your own fan club of thinking you can do things, that you have to outwork everyone. I think that may have sent you into that OODA loop a little bit going into that board. I mean, because they're pretty overwhelming when you step into your very first one, and as a private, they're really overwhelming.
Oh yeah, my mind went blank. They're asking me questions, and I'm like, I seriously, I could not have, you could not have done worse. Just poof, it's gone, and you're like, all right, well, that's pretty much how the whole board went. And I don't even think I made it to probably the last drill sergeant. And they were like, you're done. So yeah, good lesson.
I'll just leave you guys talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so when you get done, when you get selected for special forces, we're in 2001 now.
2002.
2002. Okay, so 9/11 has already happened. So you're in the selection process when it happens. Does this really open up your eyes to go, okay, I came over here to at least do something in another country, like you said. Now the world landscape's going to change. This changes everything. And does it, I don't want to use the word excite you, but does it make you, kind of further into that decision that, yeah, this was the right one?
Yes. I think most. So I don't even remember how old I was back then. 02 came 94, so 22, 6. So I would have been about 30. Yeah, 30 years old when that happened. And I know I was no different than everybody else to my left and right, where you're like, man, we just want to go over there and get in the mix, and um, you're all hungry for that. I don't fault soldiers for that, or firefighters or police officers or anybody that does this line of work. Like, you don't become a police officer to give out speeding tickets, right? You don't become a soldier to go to JRTC. You hope that your career at some point you hit the Super Bowl. And kind of weird that that's the Super Bowl, but for us that is, right? To actually deploy, and I always say, like, carry live rounds in the chamber. That that's the Super Bowl. So yeah, like when that happened, sure, I was excited, and then then I'm in the Q course, and I'm like, awesome. So now I'm in a school when this happens. I went to the school to try to get out and go do things in the world, and then the balloon goes up, and now I'm in the school. But I finished the Q course in '04, and then that was my first deployment with Special Forces, was in 2004 to Afghanistan.
When you go to Afghanistan on that first deployment, 2004, so the GWAT's been going on for 3 years at this point. You get over there. I always ask the guys, as you're coming into the country, thoughts, feelings, emotions, sights, sounds, smells. Can you describe it the first time going in?
Yeah, yeah, we're on the plane, and my battalion that I was assigned to was already deployed, so I was just flying over by myself. I'm sure I took, well, I don't know. I think I took Mil Air all the way over. But anyway, I was on the last flight going into Afghanistan, and the guy comes on the net, and it's at night, and he's like, oh, we're crossing over into a combat zone, blah, blah, blah. Right. I look back and I'm thinking, now at this juncture, like, well, what were we worried about? We're in a C-130. Like, we think we're going to get hit with a surface to air missile or something. But I don't know. Young Kent is like, man, this is crazy. This is like the movies. And lights go red in the aircraft, and we land in Bagram, and you're all bodied, armored up, and there was a sense of excitement of like, what does the future hold here? This is cool. So definitely a feeling of excitement, feeling of trepidation, and like I said, I used the word Super Bowl. That was kind of like for me, that thought, like, oh, I'm here. Like, this is it. This is, because I'd already been in the Army for a little while when that happened. That was almost 10 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I won't forget that feeling.
When you step out, sights, sounds, smells, you remember?
Yeah, I was on the airfield, Bagram Airfield. So you had F-16s, you had, drones, and you had jets and rotary wing, and all hours of the night. Those sorties were heading out most likely on combat ops. Just the buzz of Bagram, the heat of Afghanistan, even at night. I got there in I think it was June, if I remember right, June of 04. So Bagram's kind of it's low ground, it's hot, and then I remember seeing the old back 04. Things were pretty temporary back then as far as structures and whatnot. The old wooden huts and the Quonset huts and stuff. So it was just like a different world. Like you were in some kind of movie in some alien planet. But yeah, I even that first night trying to sleep, there was no sleep as these jets are taking off all night. You're like, we're never gonna get any rest here.
It's a little different feeling too, I think, for you, because you come over there as an officer, so you're going to lead these men. Some of these guys have been in combat for those full 3 years before you got there. How do you approach that? Because in your own heart that these guys know way more than you about this area, about what's going on, but you have to step up and take command of it.
Yeah. I tell young guys this story a lot. I showed up to meet my ODA. I had flown in to, I don't even honestly, no, maybe we drove in. I can't remember. We drove from Bagram down to Jalalabad at the time. There was no Jalalabad airfield. Like, there was nothing. We were living in a safe house in the city of Jalalabad with some tier 1 unit there, and so I roll in, and my team actually that I was about to take as the commander, they were on a patrol. So they came back and they were patrolling again that night. And it's like, all right, I mean, I'm going to be the ground force commander tonight. I don't even know these guys' names. And so sure enough, that night I'm on the radio, and the combat controller's next to me going, hey, sir, you may want to call this in over, SAT 104, I think was our freak at the time. He's coaching me on what to do, because I don't know. I mean, I just got there. I don't even barely know my team, right? Luckily, there was no contact or anything that night, but it was just crazy. So what you said is so true. Here you are. You'd like to think you're going to have 6 months to prepare with your team and get yourself ready and meet everybody and develop your SOPs and all the things you hope you're going to do. That's not what happened. It was show up, head out on patrol, and it's a reminder to I say, like, our job off in the military is it's not to get ready, it's to stay ready, to stay as ready as you can be, because you just don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. And our nation pays us to do a job, and oftentimes that just means keep your blade sharp and your powder dry, and that was a great case of that.
So, that first night you're there, you're going to be the ground commander. You don't know these guys' names. What's the feelings as you step out and you take over this? I mean, because this is the first time in your career, we already talked 10 years in, this is like you said, the Super Bowl, but this is real now. You cannot come back from this the very first night. What's your feelings as you step out?
Man, I just didn't want to let that team down. I'm like, every one of us is paid to do a job that's here right now. I know my job, and I just didn't want to let my new teammates down, and um, I'm very thankful we weren't in contact that night, because maybe everything would have gone just fine. But that's definitely not the way you want to meet your team is in gunfire. But that really was what was in my head. Like, how do I make sure I do my part tonight? What these guys expect of me, and then over the coming days, uh, it was a lot of just learning the team, learning who they were. To your point, understanding that I'm the new guy. I don't have a combat patch. I don't have a CIB, and these guys do. So I like teach me, let me learn, but then balance that with the fact that you still are the ground force commander, the detachment commander. And when you roll out of the wire, your team, it's not like, hey, you just got here, so it's cool. We're gonna let you have a couple months to warm up and get ready. No, man, like we roll out of the wire, like do your job. Um, I expect everybody else to do their job, and I expect myself to do my job. So yeah, that was a lot of my thoughts. Like this is what I get paid to do, and don't let these guys down.
Yeah, I would even argue that it's even, you know, how you say you got a couple months to get it. I would think it would be even stronger because these guys, I think they do after a while and they begin to know you. But in the beginning, they don't give a shit if you fail or if you don't. You'll just move on and they'll get someone else to be the commander. Would you agree with that?
Well, I ended up taking the ODA I had because the commander before me got fired. Like literally, when I showed up in Bagram, they're like, "Oh yeah, you're gonna stay. You're gonna be the battle captain for this trip." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then 2 weeks into the trip, a detachment commander gets fired, and they're like, "Pack your bags, man. You're going out to take this team." Of course, I'm happy because I don't want to be a
Of
battle captain,
course.
and I didn't want to be a staff guy and for that deployment. And so uh, that's how I filled the void. It was with a detachment commander that didn't do his job, frankly. Uh, and so yeah, like I couldn't be any more real than that. Like, poof, man, I don't want to be the next guy to get the pink slip.
Right. So as we move forward into it, you start to get into a rhythm. How long is it before you fire your weapon, actually get into a gunfight?
It's 2.5 weeks after we were in country, and we QRF'd a sister ODA that had been ambushed and was in a pretty good gun battle. So we were airlifted into where they were, linked up with them, jumped on their trucks, and for the next 24 or so hours, there was periodic little gun battles in a place called Logman Province in Afghanistan.
That's a whole new level too. Again, once again, we talk about you get there, you're the new guy. Now you're there. You've never been in a gunfight with these guys that have been in a gunfight, and you got to be the commander again. So how does that? I want to keep adding on to these levels, like we talked about in the very beginning. You're getting every level that you want. You're getting something new. So how is it different being the commander instead of one of the guys on the ground? You are in charge of a gunfight that you've never been in.
Yeah, there were so many of those experiences, like you're talking about, like that first experience of being in contact, and there was a reflection on something that I had done, whether it was in the qualification course or whether it was in Ranger School or whether it was in some training event that you'd done in the course of your career, where you're like, hey, that that thing sort of prepared me for what I'm doing right now. And it may not look exactly like that thing I did, but conceptually, um, it is the same. And so I guess I feel I look at those experiences even as a young commander and feel like pretty blessed that I had just had good training, a lot of good NCOs that kind of helped me grow up both as a private, then a young NCO, and then a young officer. That I think gave me some tools, to be successful. Um, so the feeling that you're talking about, sure, there's anxiety being in a circumstance like that because you're playing for real there. Uh, but at the same time, you fall back on the training that you've done. And great expression, like you never rise to the occasion, you fall to your level of training. So something to remember I would love to say that this experience I'm describing to you is kind of the worst way you could ever meet your ODA and the worst way you could find yourself in a gun battle. Never trained with these guys, and here you are, you're in a gunfight, or you're patrolling and you don't even know your call sign yet. But
That could be troublesome.
yeah, but it's like, okay, but I've experienced these things some capacity somewhere in my training, and just the value of being good at your job. I mean, generically, anybody, like, how do you make yourself good at your job, remembering that other people rely on you to be good at your job. I just tell people, man, I don't need you to be awesome. I just need you to be good at just being a good average. I'd love you to be a lot better, right? But at a minimum, be a good average, do your job well, and we're going to be okay. Now, in SF, it's a whole different world, right? It's like, no, you don't show up average, don't show up in my team room, or I'm not going to show up in your team room average because you expect more of me and you should. But anyway, I'm rambling a little bit.
No, not at all. Let's talk about that first adrenaline dump. When all that's over, you're headed back. You've done it. Now it's complete. The circle is complete now. You go back and you have that dump. How'd you feel?
Back in those days, not that it's not now, but it was a big deal to have a combat patch. It was a big deal to have a CIB on your uniform. Because it said, "Hey, I'm in this club now. You can't buy your way in this club. You can't trade your way into this club. There is one way to get in this club, and that is exchange lead with the enemy. I mean, that could be IED, rockets. I get it, all sorts of things. But you get the point I'm making. And so, just as a young guy who's probably not focused on all the right things, I came back that night. I'm like, all right, man, I'm part of the club now. Like, this is good. This is good. And I had told my warrant officer when I showed up, I was like, you better, like, you find us where they're at. I want to mix it up with our team. I want, not for all the right reasons, DJ. Just being a young guy, like, hungry to do your job. And I look back at that and go, that's not. Be careful what you ask for, right?
Well,
But
that's what I would ask you. Do you think now, all these years later, all this combat time that you've spent, everything that's happened to you, do you approach it the same way if you go back there? That's okay.
um, I no, age changes everything. Wisdom changes everything. Perspectives change over time. And so um, yeah, would definitely approach things differently as a 52-year-old guy than I did when I was, that age. But I think everybody does. I don't know many people that don't get to where we're at in our lives and see the world wildly different. And I don't, I don't wish war on anybody. It's not it's not glamorous. It's exciting and all that, but when you're young, but um, there's two ways that a day in combat can go. You can come back and sit in your team room, or sit with your platoon or your squad and laugh and joke and remember this and that, or then there's the bad day where someone doesn't come home, or someone's hit by an IED or someone's shot, it's a different story. You're going to have a story. One way or the other, you're going to have a story. But sometimes you write bad stories, you know, and that's what makes this business hard. So I have family in the military now that are much younger than me, kind of starting their journey. And I remind them, I hope I said, I know all you want is to do like me and go to the Super Bowl. But I said, just my prayer for you is you don't have to do that. And I know, go do it to the best of your ability, close with and destroy the enemy if that's what your nation needs you to do. But, you know, at this point in my life, I hope those young people don't have to do that. But that just comes with some gray hair, I think.
So, which story's more important, the good days or the bad days?
I think they're both important, right? Uh, they both teach you. They teach you much different lessons. Of course, everybody likes the good days.
Of course.
It's I think it's the bad days that, in a much bigger way, rewire who we are as human beings. Like that genetically alters your DNA when those really, really bad things happen. And but they're both stories. But this is not my line. But a good command sergeant major told me, he said, just be careful what war you ask for, because it might not be the war you get. Like, that's the truth. And I say that out of respect for anybody who puts a uniform on and puts themselves in harm's way. Police officers, firefighters, whatever. Like, you just don't know what the day's going to hold.
So 2004 through 2007, you're doing combat rotations to Afghanistan and Iraq. How many times do you deploy in that 3-year time period?
I deployed in 04, 05, every year. 04, 05, 06, 07. Yeah, every year.
Okay. So you've got these deployments. Do you feel yourself changing at all as you come back? Because we already talked about as you get gray hair, you start looking at life a little different. Do you feel you're changing as a person when you come back as opposed to when you're overseas?
Yeah, but here's the thing, and I'm not I'm not alone in saying this. I think changes that happen in people that serve military careers, whether in peacetime or conflict, but particularly in conflict, those changes are more apparent to the people that you are around than yourself, because change doesn't necessarily happen abruptly. It happens over time. And so if you were to ask my wife, uh, she would tell you absolutely the person she married and the person she's married to now are two different people. Um, and that's in large part because of my career and you know, just the journey of 30 years in the military. Um, so yeah, I know my loved ones notice it more than I do, but I also think at this point in my life, I can look back now and go, yeah, I see, um, not the physical scars, but the other scars that you sort of carry that change you. Um, I recognize those things in myself at this point that I may not have 10 years ago, right? But I see it now. So
Before the injury happens, is there any significant story or mission or anything like that that you saw yourself change? We talked about your family noticing it, but was there anything where you maybe looked at the world differently after it happened? Or because I can think of times in my law enforcement career where things happen and I'm like, okay, I changed the way I think about this.
yeah, I I think as Americans, we often take advantage of this incredible place called the United States. And we wrestle with all these dumb first world problems that we think are so horrible, right? And I got to imagine, I know you've got your military career and then your law enforcement career, and I know you've seen and experienced a lot of things as well, right? And there were pivotal times in my life deployed where I realized the difference in the value of human life. Um, I realized that this euphoric place here where everything's wonderful and we don't really worry about a whole lot of things, to be honest. You know, even our poor are sometimes overweight, right? Like that tells you something. Um, Not the case in all, places like Afghanistan and Iraq, especially in times of war. So yeah, there were times when I would go back to my room at night and go, my perception of the world just changed tonight. Um, and that could be some combat experiences too, but I think I learned more from watching civilians responding to war as much as I did the warfighter responding to war, or just some of the bad things that happen in war, um, and what it does to humans, what it does to human nature, what it does to your perspectives, how it, I think, can erode at who you are as a human being if you don't stand as a sentry to guard yourself against those things. So yeah, there's definitely times where I went back to my room and things from that day forward would look different. And you know what? Maybe some are bad too, and some are good. Like I think you can learn some good lessons through some
A
hardships
hundred
too.
percent. But I think it's interesting when you bring up that you learn more from the civilian than maybe from the warfighter about the world. Can you kind of compare then the way an American civilian reacts to war and to the warfighter, and to the way a civilian in the country that you're in reacts to a war and a warfighter?
Ask me that in a different way because I want to make sure I understand your
So
question.
what I'm saying is when you come back here and you see the
Yeah.
things like you said, the first world problems that we have, and you see the things that we're in the streets protesting and all of those kind of things, and you see the way people respond to the war that we're having here. And then you go over to the country where it's actually happening. You're in their villages, you're in their homes. What's the difference in how they respond to it and how maybe the United States responds to it?
Well, if I use the phrase first world problems that we have, those people that I experienced, God bless them, they didn't have first world problems. Like they had real problems. I don't know how I'm going to eat tonight. My village might get hit tonight. Um, I there's a when I was a young captain, I was in a base in Kogiani district of Nangarhar province, and we had set up a fire base there. And at night, the Taliban had set a mine up outside the road leading into our base, clearly to hit us, right? But we had Afghan National Army guys with us, and when the vehicle, we had contracted some civilians to feed our Afghans. And so they were bringing in some rice that morning in these little yellow and white taxis that are all over Afghanistan. And man, this taxi hits a double stacked anti tank mine and just blows the vehicle apart. And the driver is like still alive, but extremely injured, like very, very seriously injured, missing limbs. And I mean, he's expiring, So we bring him into the base and we treat him and we medevac him off. We were able to get a flight in and get him out. And um, the Afghan commander, the company commander of the ANA, he's out. He's out talking to the family of the guy that just got. He died on the flight, So I felt that I needed to go out and tell that family, like, I'm sorry, but in this case, it was a mom and dad, I think, or there's definitely a mom. There's other family members, maybe a brother. I can't remember all the details of who was who, but like, man, I need to go out and tell these people that he didn't make it. And the company commander's out there for the Afghans, and he's telling them that they need to go out and get more food for his guys. And I pulled I was pretty irate. I'm like, you got to be kidding me, man. I'm about to come out here and tell them that their family member's dead, and you're worried about getting rice for your guys right now. Like, so I pulled the company commander aside, and I was kind of tongue lashing him, and but then the family stepped in, and they're like, no, 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 no. We'll have rice here later today. No problem. Everything's good. And what I realized was like they needed the money, and they didn't want to lose this contract they had with us. And the fact that their son and their brother just succumbed to a driving over anti-tank mines, and died a horrible death, like that was not important right then. What was important is they still had mouths to feed. So you want to talk about first world problems and second and third world problems, right? At that moment in time was the first time, which was reinforced multiple times in both Afghanistan and Iraq and other countries I've been in my career over the course of my career. The value of human life, the value of what really matters when you don't necessarily have like we have. And honestly, like not that you asked this question, but my appreciation for this country and what we have and what I'm never going to complain about, because I've seen people that don't even have a fraction of what we have. You won't hear complaints. You won't hear complaints from me. I don't need to be thanked for my service. Now this is we are so blessed to be an American. And if you like, it's a privilege to say in my life, I got to be a part of like defending this thing that's so incredible. And you don't. I think a lot of people miss that opportunity or don't truly appreciate how lucky you are to wake up here, and how blessed you are if you get a chance to, like in your case, you defended it overseas, you defended it here, our own, the homeland. Um, you wore the uniforms to protect this place. That's awesome.
Well, and
Um,
so, and to interrupt you, I never spent time in combat. I got out before. Here's my thing. I've spent 20 years in a major metropolitan city. And
okay.
the reason I asked that question is because I've seen it from a different aspect. I've never seen the combat aspect. But what I've seen is when you have protests, and we had them in 2020, we've had them a
Sure.
lot recently.
Yeah.
When you have these people gather up for these protests, what doesn't make any sense to me, because I watch them at the ground level, is they don't even know what they're protesting. They've never seen they, they've never seen combat. They've never seen hard times, like you said. They've never had a family member blown up and then have to make sure their job gets done so that they have food at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And a recent protest that I've seen, we're protesting about 6 different things, and you have splinter groups that are filming rap videos, and you have people that are doing all of these different things in this protest. And at one point the crowd got quiet and they had to figure out something new that they wanted to protest in the middle of the protest. And that's why I wanted to ask you from that point of view, when you've seen it over there, because I never have. But I think people truly understand what it takes to be in war that are over there. Over here, it's a catchphrase in a protest.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this weird tension inside of me when I talk about protest, because I'm like, man, I'm glad you can protest. I'm glad you don't have a tyrannical government that's going to come here.
Right.
Because guess what? Go ahead and protest in some of these other countries, man. You're going to find yourself being tortured in prison. And if you're lucky, you might get out someday. We don't have that fear. So like I love the fact that we're free, but at the same time, I wish some of these protests that are happening, like again, it. I think some things are short sighted because you don't have those experiences to compare to, um, where people really have a reason to protest. But you know what? To put a bow on it, though, man, I guess I'm thankful they can protest. Just don't get crazy when you protest, right?
Right, right. All right. I think we need to talk about the big thing in your career because, like I said, I think it changed your career for a couple different reasons. I'm talking about 27th of July, 2007, Operation Volcano 2. You're there to capture a senior Mahdi army leader. Let's lay out the day and what happens because I have a lot of questions that surround not only the incident, but you yourself.
Okay. Yeah, you kind of nailed the what the mission was. You know, it was a rotary wing infill into Karbala, Mahdi militia stronghold, um, and sort of a night gone bad, at least for me. Luckily, I was the only guy that got wounded that night on our side, of course. Um, but yeah, we infilled onto the objective. We weren't on the ground for minutes, and we were, you know, it was a gun battle there in the city that transpired, and I was on the street. We were just forming up to actually move off the objective, and meet aircraft that were going to take us back to Area 4 in Baghdad, and then there was some insurgents that were moving toward our position. I engaged them. I ended up moving from cover to, uh, you know, I had lost where those insurgents went. You know, so kind of moved from cover to try to ensure that we neutralized that threat. And you know, subsequently, I got shot. Got shot multiple times. Uh, Pretty seriously wounded. Uh, Good medic on the couple good medics saved my life, and eventually got me out that night.
When it happens, is there an RPG that is there's a someone with an RPG and that's who you went to kind of eliminate, correct?
Well, yeah, I saw him running. Funny, I don't have a lot of memories of that night because I, you know, got lost a lot of blood, but uh, I I still remember seeing the guy running towards our guys. He didn't. I don't think he saw me. I thought he had an RPG. Still don't know if he had an RPG, but I thought he did. This was at night under night vision on a really cloudy night, and so yeah, I shot that guy, and then um, moved forward. Basically, you know, as I understand it, right? He had some ranger buddies up there that I didn't see, right? And
Some people that could give you a blow by blow.
yeah, they got so you know, I got shot by somebody I didn't even see. I didn't know he was there. He was hiding. I think he was hiding behind a vehicle. Um, so yeah, it's a bad night.
So let me ask you then, the last clear image that you had, because you said you don't remember a lot of the night. What's the last clear image you have in your mind before getting shot?
Before getting shot, I actually turned to a guy that was with me on the corner, and I told him, I said, "Hey, you know, shot a guy up here. I don't know. I've lost contact with him. I thought he had an RPG. I'm worried this guy's going to get the jump on us." So I said, "Hey, let's move forward." So he moved forward with me, and then when I got shot, as I understand the story, like the bullets that were actually going through me were zipping off the ground around him. He's like, "Oh, we're in contact, right? I'm going to head back to did the right thing, move back to cover." Uh, but I'm laying on the ground, and I didn't know how bad things were. I knew I'd been shot in the shoulder. I knew I had been shot in the leg because I heard my femur break and I felt my leg give out. And my sciatic nerve was completely severed in my leg, and so I had no feeling. So I immediately thought my leg's blown off. Like I can't feel my leg. And all I could think to do with that, and I do remember, I'm like, I'm gonna get drug off by insurgents tonight. and I'm gonna die with bunch of a bunch of enemy insurgents. Um, and so these things are in my head, but really, honestly, the first thing I really thought about was my kids. And my in the cloud of that moment, um, I thought about them. They were 8 years old and 11 years old when I was shot, and I really that was like a thing, like, hey, like, you like, let's fight to live. Let's, and it's funny, I was dying. I'm at my artery was severed. I'm bleeding out. I'm dying, and that was the moment that I was like, all right, get your wits about you. We got to survive. But oddly enough, through all that, I probably I don't remember thinking I'm gonna die, but I do remember thinking I don't want to leave my kids. I don't want my kids to grow up without me like that. So that's when I got on the radio, said, "Hey, I'm shot. My leg's broke," and that's really all. That's really all I knew. I think I said something like, I'm injured very badly and my leg is broke. I've been shot." And that's when a couple of medics came up and started treating me.
So, which do you think hurt worse, the injuries or thinking you got to make it to take care of your kids? Which do you think concerns you more at the time?
I gotta say, probably my kids, because, like I say, I wasn't dwelling on dying.
Right,
Um, but it was about, like, hey, you gotta, we gotta fight. Like, if I'm gonna go, it's not gonna be because I didn't try to live.
right.
Um, and so, you don't know what's gonna cross your mind in a moment like that. Um, so I do look back in that and go, okay, hey, that was my kids. I and I Of course, I thought about my wife and other things, but I mean, at that very moment, it was my children. So yeah, rough night.
Do you at any point in your mind, and maybe you don't remember, that you've done all this to get here, right? You've always said you're looking for that next adventure. You're looking for all of this kind of stuff. You even told your warrant you want to chase that dragon and all that kind of stuff. At any moment, do you go, well, shit, that might have not been worth it?
Well, it goes back to that, the two kinds of nights, right? And that was my night. That was the night I'm like, the life I led to that moment at 35 and the life I would live after would be dramatically different. There's really very few things in my life that haven't been touched in some degree by that event. So, um, I think at that moment, like I told you, I thought my leg was gone, right? I'm like, well, life's different now. I didn't know how different it was going to be. Um, but that was my bad story. That was the one I didn't come back and laugh at the team room about.
Yeah, I hope not. Uh, so then let me ask you, because you said there's probably not a point of your life that hasn't been touched by that night, right?
Yeah.
For the better or for the worse?
Both. There's no way to bin those into one bin over the other.
Okay.
Definitely both. Um, chronic pain, all the problems, all the medical issues that are associated with this injury, and how it has changed my life. That's clearly that's the bad stuff.
Of course.
Um, and I don't. I hear a lot of people who go through traumatic events and they go, man, really glad that happened, because all these things wouldn't have happened if this bad thing didn't happen, right? Um, I don't wake up and and go, man, am I ever glad this happened? But somebody who was smarter than me, who lost his leg, was actually in a motocross accident. But he said it, and this was when I heard him say it. It was probably 10 years after 12 years after I lost my leg, and I didn't know how to express it until I heard him say it. But he goes, "I am not happy. I've lost my leg, but I am happy for the experiences that have come about because of this event." And I'm like, you know what? That's exactly right. I am a different human being. Every part of me has changed in some way because of this experience. And so the people I've met, the things I've done, the attitude I think I have now that's different. Um, everything is different. So I am grateful for the experiences. I'm grateful for that. But I sure would like to have a leg.
Do you hold any anger at that night?
No.
Do you think you ever did?
Hindsight's yeah, I mean hindsight's 2020, right? Like, hey, probably shouldn't have broke that corner and moved forward if I had made a different decision. You know, I armchair quarterback myself, and I'm very thankful that the only life that was impacted was mine. There would have been a lot of guilt, I think, if I had made a decision that cost a teammate. Um, that thank God that wasn't the case. Uh, but yeah, I armchair quarterback myself. Go like, man, you didn't have to do that. Uh, Probably a little bit too rambunctious that night.
Well,
So
I've heard a couple stories about your career. I heard that when Red Wings happened,
yeah.
that you actually took a group of Rangers and beat the airlift crew to the site.
Not true as far as beating them. Um, they got to the site before us, but we were the only ones to actually walk in. Just because it was the difficulty of the terrain. Um, mo- Most guys that left weren't able to make it to the objective.
I bring that up because to me, that's been your whole career. You said a little rambunctious, but I think you've always been willing to push the envelope a little bit.
Maybe.
I wouldn't use the word rambunctious. I would say you're willing to push the envelope in order to get the job done that needs to be done. That night, when you got shot, in many instances before in combat, you were willing to do and willing to show it. There's a lot of people that will say they're willing to do it, but you really put it on the line that you are willing to do it.
Yeah, I suppose, you could hard to talk about myself that way, but sure, I suppose you could say that.
Well, this comes from other people, and there's another story that I have coming up later on. But let's move on with this. So you're flown out of country, 29 surgeries. I just got to understand the mental toll that 29, not even the physical toll, the mental toll that 29 surgeries take on someone.
Uh, Actually, not as a bragging point, it's 36, but
Okay.
um, here's the thing. Yeah, that there's a toll, right? That's of course it sucks. You don't have to, but to put it in perspective, when I was in the hospital, when I was in Walter Reed, there was guys that were having far more than me, and it's like, this is not a time to feel sorry for yourself. Just look around. Um, and so there was a perspective that came about given the gravity of what was in the room to your left and to your right and what was happening that in some ways, like I felt, well, I'm a lucky one here. Uh, when I saw what others had experienced, you know, when I was in Walter Reed, there was like two of us. Walter Reed was so full, people were in the hallways at that time, and I was actually on a different ward than I should have been on because the ward I was supposed to be in was full, right? And so there was only a couple of us had been shot. Like everybody else was blown up. and the explosive injuries were worse in many cases than gunshot wounds, you know? So, and there was just a perspective there of like, I'm kind of oddly like a lucky one here. So, yeah, 36 surgeries, but there's guys in the 60s and 70s and triple digits, and you're like, I got nothing to complain about.
You got nothing to complain about, but what about the nights when you have nothing to do but stare at the ceiling or just think back on the night that it happened or just think back on how things could have been different? There had to be those nights in there.
No, there was plenty. No, there, yes, I don't want to mischaracterize the wave of emotions that you go through in an experience like that. The unknowns, you know, like I don't know if I'll ever walk again. I didn't lose my leg that night. I lost it later, but like, um, am I am I still going to be able to be in the military? If not, what am I going to do to take care of my family? You know, what will this pain ever go away? Just go down the list of all the things that just are unknowns, and then the anger of bad things happening. Right, life's not the way it used to be. Never will be. This sucks. Poor me. Um, so yeah, I'm not saying I didn't go through all that. I definitely did. I was definitely unfair to people, loved ones in my life. Um, and but those things too shall pass, right? You got to get through the, you got to go on the journey.
What do you think you feared the most?
Um, I think I feared not being. I think I feared being a shadow of a person that I had been before. And you know, I could deal with the idea of a prosthetic limb or uh, I be honest with you, I didn't really know what the future would look like. But what I think I was most afraid of was just losing the ability to do the things that, for me, were the things that made me kind of tick and made me happy. Whether that was my career as a Green Beret, whether that was being athletic and being physical, um, you know, uh, playing with my kids the way I wanted to play with my kids, and how I envisioned them growing up with me and what we would do together. Like, yeah, I didn't know if those things were ever going to happen. So lots of fear, but the fears were of more of the unknowns. And like, I knew there was a new normal coming. I just didn't know what new normal looked like.
So do you think with those fears of, how you wanted to see your kids growing up with you athletically, all that kind of stuff, did you ever learn at a point like that the important thing is you, not the leg, not the ability, but being present and stuff? Do you think you ever learned that, or you had a moment of clarity about that?
Uh, yeah, I think it came a lot later, and I am no different than a lot of guys who I think find after an incident like this, like you've got to do some things to prove to yourself and others that you're still who you know. Oh, I can still do all this stuff, you know, and like I'm gonna go do, you know, this crazy physical event to prove to you and everybody else I can still do this. You know, and like there's this overcompensation to still be who you were. I went through that. I was like doing crazy stuff uh, physically to prove to myself and others, like, look, I'm still, you know, I'm still here. I'm still in the fight. I can do this with a prosthetic, and hey, I want to get back to active duty, full active duty as a Green Beret. I mean, I'm not gonna let this define me. And so I think that my experience, that's a lot of people's journey is, and then for me, after a while, and I kind of got through all this, I realized that's important. Maybe that's what I needed at the time, but that's not what I necessarily need now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. But it sounds to me like Like you're proving more to yourself than other people. So the question would be like, what would what was more annoying to you? Learning how to be this new person with the prosthetic or listening to the naysayers that said you'll never get back to combat, you'll never be back to full active duty, you'll never be the person that you were?
I'd say the first. The second was just motivation to me. Like, I will show you. Um, just get out of the way. I will, I will prove to you I'm going to do this.
Was there
Um,
anybody that you thought should be backing you that maybe didn't, that was telling you, no, you'll never do it again?
I don't. Nobody ever said that to me. I actually, in a lot of ways, had the exact opposite experience. Where I needed a first job after being wounded to come back to the regiment. And I had a battalion commander call me and say, Kent, I have this HHC command I need a captain for. Are you willing to do the job? And I'm like, you know, first, very thankful that he would even, like, I was pretty broke at this. I'm still pretty broke right now.
Right.
Still going through surgeries. I mean, I'm busted up.
How far
Uh,
along do you think we are? How many months are we into this or years into
Oh man,
this?
this is I think I took my first job back. It was in '08. I'm at, I'm probably 6 months, 7 months post injury, maybe a little bit more. I honestly can't remember exactly when I took the job, but there was somebody who believed in me. There was somebody who gave me a chance. And that was my foot in the door. And that was in a training environment, not operational or anything like that. And while I had that job, I made the decision to amputate my leg because it wasn't getting better. Um, and so amputated my leg. 6 weeks later, came back, promoted to major, and got another job. Um,
All right, Kent, I gotta stop you though. You, I, I love how you do it, and I hate how you do it. You breeze over these big things. You're like, I decided to take the leg. You can't breeze over stuff like that. That's not an easy decision to make.
yeah, you know what? For me, it really was, DJ. I'm telling you, man. It was 2.5 weeks after getting wounded. The surgeon came in my room, my orthopedic surgeon, and he said, Kent, you got a very serious injury. Likelihood of you regaining function of your leg is super low. We're going to do some nerve grafts, and even if we're extremely successful, you're going to get a low percentage return. And I'm like, well, let's just not waste all that time. Like, you guys just amputate it now. And he's like, well, I think they took it from a ethical perspective, maybe, but also from a perspective of like, once we turn the light switch out, there's no turning it back on. So we could just wait a year, see if this works. So I made my mind up like right after getting wounded. I was like, we can do this tomorrow. It's fine. Just do it. So it was not hard. It was not a hard decision. I actually convinced the doctor to do it early.
But taking the leg, and correct me if I'm wrong, but taking the leg exponentially bumps up the probability that you're not going to go back to full active status, that you're not going to go back to the regiment.
Actually, it was the other way around. My leg was so bad, there would have been no way for me to return. So I said, well, I think I can do more on a prosthetic,
Okay.
and I can run again with a prosthetic leg. I couldn't run anymore. Um, the outlook on a prosthetic limb to live a more active lifestyle, well, the outlook's not the right word. The likelihood of being able to live a much more active lifestyle was very high on a prosthetic limb. Um, Very low on my damaged leg. And so go back to what I said about, hey, I want to do all these things with my kids. Hey, I want to continue to be a Green Beret, and I want to be operational, and I want to continue to be athletic. To me, all that just it was it could be done on a carbon leg it could not be done on flesh and bone that I had left. So not a hard
I
decision.
mean, no, I see when you say it like that. And speaking of being athletic, is it true that you actually won the over 40 Jingle Bell Jog, the 10K, on a prosthetic leg, pulling a wagon behind you?
No, I don't know who told you that story, but that's a good one. But no,
It's not true.
actually,
AJ told
no,
me that was true.
no, actually, that Jingle Bell Jog was my first opportunity to run after being injured. Like not like my first day to run,
Of
but I mean my
course.
first time to enter an event. I was as a youngster, I was a competitive cyclist and I was a competitive runner, ran in the Army. So like that was all part of who I was before I lost my leg. So um, I did not win that race though. So
He says you won the over 40, and he says you won it
oh, you
because
know what? Honestly, maybe that's not fair. I didn't catch the over 40 part. I thought you
yeah,
meant like I won overall.
because he said he was demoralized completely by it.
That could be true then. If we're talking age group, That's fair. That's
Okay.
fair. Yeah, not the overall winner.
But once again, do you think you're proven to yourself or you're proven to others right there?
No, it was both. I'm telling you, I went all in on some athletic stuff after that, uh, and it was. Now, when I think about it, it really was both. I had to prove to myself that I still had that uh, fire inside of me to compete and do hard things. And when I say compete, like, and I always would choose, like, I'm not competing against disabled people. Like, put me in the category with able-bodied people. I don't choose to look at myself in a certain way. There were some things I did as a para athlete, but most of it I chose to compete as a able-bodied athlete. So why do you do that? Because you want to compete and prove like um, that I could still do this, and so um, and even some of the things I was allowed to do after in the regiment as an amputee, I feel fortunate about because commanders took risks on me. Because no matter how much I'd like to think I can do the same things I did before I lost my leg, after I lost my leg, that's a lie. Like there's some things I just couldn't possibly do at the same level anymore. But I had good people that were like, I'm going to take a chance on you.
But,
And
but
so
don't you think that was from your work ethic before? That wasn't just because someone was trying to be nice to you. That was from what came before.
I don't dispute that with you, but I think, some of this is about, you have to make organizational decisions too, right? So if I'm like, hey, I'm going to put Kent to command this unit in combat with a prosthetic leg, chances are everything's going to be fine. But there's this like 5% chance that the balloon's going to go up and, another Operation Red Wing or something crazy like that. And this guy with the prosthetic limb is not going to be able to lead the way I might need him to. So I had to have that frank conversation with a couple commanders, like when they would interview me to come back, and I just tell them like I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that I'm perfectly whole. I'm going to tell you that I have some limitations and you need to know them. And then when you make a decision on me, you're accepting that risk. Luckily, every commander I sat down and had that conversation with, they said, yeah, I'm willing to take that risk. Um,
How important
but
is that to you?
Well, it was very important to me. But in retrospect, DJ, I always say to myself, though, sometimes those are selfish decisions. And we always have to be really honest brokers and say, is this, to go back to something you said earlier, is this about me or is this about the organization and the people I lead? I would not be able to sleep at night if someone lost their life because I failed to do something. And maybe it was because I had limitations that I didn't have before, but I was willing to I had to prove to myself and others I could still be a Green Beret and go, that's not fair. And we have to make decisions that are for more than just yourself. You know what I mean? And
So, and I don't want to stop that answer, but do you think you ever pushed yourself maybe too hard so that that didn't happen, or maybe take more risk than you had to just to make sure that didn't happen?
I will say I probably put myself in situations where I was not going to let down the men that I was leading. I was going to do things that were hard, were probably not good for me because of, the condition of my body. But, when you sign up to do something, then you do it, right? I signed up to do this. And so now, um, that's my job and I'm going to do it. So, but when I look back at this and when I counsel other young people who are at that stage in their life that I'm talking about when I was in shortly after being wounded, I just remind them of that. This decision is not about you. Um, this decision has to be about the people you lead, the people that count on you, and don't ever let them down because you had too much pride to say, maybe this injury does take me out of the game or this circumstance or this situation.
When you return back to, we'll say, full status, that was pretty quick that you returned back to full status because you took command, you said, within 6 months. So I'm considering that full status, but full combat status, we're talking, 2012 that you go back to combat?
Yeah, 2010, I deployed to Afghanistan to serve as an advisor in an advisory role
Okay.
to the Afghan special operations. But truthfully, not, we weren't out in the hinterlands doing combat operations.
Right.
Uh, actual, I was a special forces company commander in 2012 and deployed to Afghanistan. Uh, and that was more of that role.
Okay. When you return back to that status, the first question is, how humbled are you? How honored are you to be back to that? And number two, what do you got planned? Because, like we've talked about this whole conversation where you said you wanted to chase that dragon, it's a little different world now. You're commanding with much more world perspective and physical known limitations perspective. How do those two coincide with each other? Because I know you have to be over the moon that you're back in the job that you've always wanted to do.
Yeah. I think one. I talked to you about the conversations I had with my commanders that
Right.
sort of had to hire me back. But the sort of the paradox of all this is that I really tried to live my career um, in such a way to be held to the same standard that everybody else is held to, and not to be defined by my injury. So I used to say, like, I would like you to know me as Kent Kent the Green Beret, Kent the dad, Kent the husband, Kent the Christian, not Kent the amputee, right? Like that's just not who I wanted to be. I didn't want people to think about me that way, and so I really strove to. Um, you're talking about when I was a company commander to just be a company commander. Oh, by the way, it just happens to be that my company commander doesn't have a leg, you know. But I wanted that to be white noise, and so it was very, very. It still is very, very important to me to not be defined by this injury. Like I am so many more things just like any human being, there's so many more things than the bad thing that happened to you, right? And so, like, unfortunately for me, this is a it doesn't take long for someone to figure out you're missing a leg when you're wearing shorts, right? So it's kind of just it kind of becomes unfortunately a part of who you are because you can see it. But I try very hard in my life to that this is not this is just something that happened to me, but it's not who I am. And I tried to command that way too. Like, I'm your commander, I'm part of your unit. I just happen to be missing a leg, but it really doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. We can joke around about it and whatever, but it's just not who I am. It's not what defines me. It's not the thing in my life that's this is who Kent is. Like, you know, I want to be 500 other things than this thing, and so I chose to lead my military career that way too. And um, and I think it helped me, and honestly, I think it helped the people that were on my left and right too to just realize like that's how we're gonna handle this, and we're just a bunch of guys out here gonna get the job done. One of them just has to have five toes.
Do you think that whether publicly or privately, there were people that were saying it'll never last, it'll never work, he'll never be fully, you know, where they kind of, I guess the word would be where they look and they go, how can he lead the way that he used to? How can he do the things? Or do you think people in the ODA and all of that kind of stuff fully backed you up and knew you could handle it no matter how you came back to them?
Yeah, I never sensed that anybody questioned or worried that like he's gonna fall short. Maybe they did, they just didn't tell me, or
Right.
they didn't show me. But I never felt that. And you know, I made a practice of like anything my guys do, I'm gonna do too, right? It's whether it was back in CONUS or whether it was forward. There was few things that uh, I could think of that I wouldn't do that they did. I needed them to know like just you can count on me. You know, if we're gonna jump out of the plane, I'll jump out with you,
Right.
or whatever the task at hand was. You know, so I I tried to reassure through my actions that um, don't you don't need to worry. You know what I mean? Like, those are choices. You know, I guess I could say we can say I don't know your story, but you probably got something in your life that could have been a defining moment for you that you chose for it not to be. And those things you can't control what happens to you all the time, but you control everything that happens after
Right.
to some degree, right? To some degree, and I think that's the important thing.
So, what are your fit? Because I've asked you this the whole time. Your first time in combat, your first time in a gunfight. The first time you get in a gunfight, coming back as an amputee, uh, and in command, do those? Does that night come rushing back to you? Does any of that show up, or is it just laser focused on?
Yeah, nope. I never. I mean, I didn't know how I'd respond, right? But I didn't have those like, oh my gosh, you know, like Saving Private Ryan moment where I'm cowering under
Right.
something because I'm afraid to get shot again. Nah, and that says nothing about me. I think it's just more about, you know, you're in the moment and you're focusing on what matters. I got blown up pretty good in 2012. Luckily we were in an MRAP, me and the crew, right, and the vehicle saved our lives because it was a very big charge. But I do remember, like, the first thing I did, look down at my legs. I'm like, man, I hope I didn't lose another limb, you know. But so of course, uh, those things were on my mind maybe differently than other people when you've already gone through something physical, some trauma from combat. But it it didn't affect me in a way that um, I'll say it did. The only way I would say it affected me is you have a little more respect. You have a little more respect for what can happen. That sometimes being a young cowboy that we all are, you don't fully embrace. But, I talked about gray hair. Well, this case, it was just more of an experience. It's like, nah, there's a healthy respect for what's going on around me and the outcome.
So it didn't, I mean, from everything you're saying, it really didn't affect you. But let's talk about the family that's back home, that's already seen what you went through the first time an injury happened, saw what combat can actually do to a person, to a family, all of those kind of things. And then they see you go back into a combat zone. You think it heightens that level for them?
I have no doubt that my wife would have gone through a whole range of emotions because she knew what I aspired to do, and I have an extremely supportive wife that uh, even when I still wanted to continue to do this after, there was never a question of like, hey, are you sure? Like, she was like, okay, like we're in, let's go. But I have to imagine that there was a heightened level of concern and fear when I deployed again. Like, are we going to go through this again? With my kids, my wife did a very good job of of, when I was injured to keep my kids' lives pretty normal. Like, of course, she's up at the hospital with me, but family was there, and she kept their routines the same. She kept their sports schedules the same. She tried to just protect them a little bit from the chaos that was our life at that time. And I think um, my daughter is now married to a soldier, and my son is a soldier, and so I'm like, well, I guess whatever she did, to insulate them from this, uh, help them to choose to either marry into or follow the same career path. So that's credit to my wife, but I would give that advice to other people too. Um, how you write the chapters of your story of going through something like this. Like, it's important in how you approach it, and how you carry other people through it. And so when they write that last chapter of that book, right, like, it matters on how you wrote all the other chapters. If I use my kids as an example, like how my wife handled it, uh, there's no doubt that experience in their lives, it has changed who they are in some way, and it's caused them to be different in some way. But I think in a lot of ways it's healthy. It's not a horrible, terrible experience, but it's just like an experience that this family went through. Um, but I don't know. My wife's, I can't imagine being in her shoes and seeing her get terribly injured and go through some horrible experiences together. We went through them together, and then say, "Now I'm going to go back." Um, so testament to her, and like her grit.
Do you ever feel guilty about it?
No, no, I don't. And of course, if she had just, you know, if we had that discussion and she had felt very strongly about it, I think it would have been, I would have had to have understood and had made a different decision, because that just would not be fair.
Right.
Um, but I don't, and I don't, because I think she was supportive as she was. And let's face it, it turned out okay, right? I didn't lose any more limbs or die, right? So we can look back and go, whew,
I
yeah,
guess
that's
that's a
so worked
pretty
out.
positive look at it.
Yeah.
Here's the big thing though, because we've been talking about your wife frequently in the conversation. How long have you been married for?
32 years.
Okay. Special operations, the injuries that you received, all the combat that you did, you stayed married. That that's a rarity. There's very few guys that I know that it sticks out for that. Even in law enforcement, first responders, those long careers and stuff. How important is that relationship to making you as good as you were with Special Forces with your career?
The significance of that relationship cannot be understated. I have been to hundreds of, that's an exaggeration, but changes of commands and changes of responsibility and big events where everybody stands up and thanks their wife and couldn't have done this without you, blah blah blah. For me, like, no kidding, it is actually true. And she has carried our family. She has bore the burden of being a spouse of someone who deploys a lot, someone who your job asks a lot of you, someone who was wounded. So to answer your question, there I had there is no credit that goes solely to me for anything in my life related to what we're talking about that she doesn't have 51%. She doesn't own 51% of. So if you get lucky enough to have a wife like mine, um, yeah, like I reminded her recently, she never let me believe that I couldn't get back up again. So
Yeah. I've been married 27 years, so it's
you understand.
it's tough.
Yeah.
It is. It's work in itself every day, and to compound those things with the jobs that you have, with the things that you do, only makes it worse. So it's a true testament that you guys made it that long. The last thing I want to kind of talk to you about your career is the last command that you had. From the way I understand it, you're in charge of all of the medical training. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Being in charge of that, knowing what those guys on the ground did to save your life that night, because you could have very well died on that street.
Yep.
How important is that job? And when you oversee that, making sure those guys are the absolute best that they can possibly be.
Yeah, that's a good question. When I accepted they asked me if I wanted that job. I'm like, yeah, definitely. I'll take that job. The course we ran multiple courses, but the sort of the key course was a 37-week long course, and then we would do 7 of these courses a year, and I'd go to the graduation, and I would remind. It was funny because myself and my command sergeant major, we had both been Purple Heart recipients, evac'd off the battlefield, and we're both like, like, hey, let me just tell you a story. Like, this is not the story of me being wounded. I'm walking around the hallway in shorts. They all know
Right.
my story, right? But just a reminder of the importance of what they had learned and the significance of being good at their job and the role that they play on the team and the fact that they allow other people to do dangerous things, because people will do dangerous things more so when they feel like there's somebody with an aid bag behind them when things just don't go right. And so, yeah, I tried not to miss too many opportunities to tell um, those medics in training, like, and graduating medics, this is what it's all about. And tall order for a young person, but like, live up to it, join the long line. And me and my CSM are standing there because you guys, people like you, learned to do your job and then did it in extremist circumstances. So, and then the guy that replaced me, I got to nominate. Well, I got to suggest who might replace me, but he was another very seriously wounded guy that came in after me, and I thought, this is good. Like, he bears the scars of combat, but he's there because a special forces medic did his job. So
When you step away, you take off the uniform because it's done now, and you're retired. That first day of being retired, you feel different?
yeah, and my story may not be like everybody else's. I feel as I am very okay with taking off my uniform, and I don't have. I think a lot of guys have some struggles. Understandably, you can't be a police officer for 20 years in a metropolitan city and not suddenly the next day you wake up and you're like, what am I going to do today, right? Or same with military, right? Like you can't do that and not experience some emotions. But um, I look back and just go, I'm thankful for my career. I'm thankful for the experiences. There wasn't a whole lot left for me to do that I think that I would have found the fulfillment in. If my nation needs me, if we go to war tomorrow, and they're like, "Can't we need you?" I'm not gonna want to go back and do it. I'm older and it hurts now, but I would do it because it's like I said at the beginning of this podcast, this nation's worth it, and I would do it. Um, but I don't have regrets. I'm walking off the stage. Just I'm ready to do the next thing. Proud of my service. Happy that I did something that gave me value, or that I really felt was a calling. Um, but you know, life's all about the seasons and what's next. So
So
I really am okay.
what's next?
I'll run the foundation. I've been doing that part time for a long time, night. So I'm looking forward to just fully investing myself in our mission.
Well, let's talk about that.
Okay.
Gold Star Teen Adventures. The whole point behind them is trying to think how I want to say this. I think it's more about your job there is helping the family than the legacy of a soldier. Is that, would you think? Because we talk so much about your family and how your wife kind of kept everything normal. So you had a son that joined, followed the same career path. Your daughter married a soldier. I think it's that your organization is more about keeping things normal and letting them understand that there's chapters after that.
I would agree with the chapters afterwards part. I, you know, Wildly different experiences, physical trauma versus emotional trauma of losing someone you love, but both trauma and both things that could could stunt your growth as a human being. I think you can either stall out over bad things or you move forward, and so like that's clearly a message of what we do is moving forward. And I also just really um, I have reflected on how my children may have been different if I were not here. And I've already talked about how amazing my wife is. So it's not that like, oh, uh, she, without me, our kids would be screwed up.
Right.
That's not at all what I'm saying. It's just, it takes, it's oftentimes different, parents play different roles in relationships. And I think there's things that uh, a father brings into a relationship. So let me just stop there to say I'm not saying we're trying to be anybody's father, and
Of
or play
course.
that role. But what I do think is important is to give um, young people the opportunity to really, I use the expression, become the absolute best version of yourself, the best you that you can be. And we work with kids 14 to 19, 14 to 20 years old. To me, those are really important years in young people's lives. That's where you make choices. You make choices about um, what kind of person you're going to be, what kind of values are important to you, where are you going to put your energy. Um, uh, those I think those years really can have an impact on what young adulthood, college, and career looks like. Being a family person, so our program is about creating young people of character values being young leaders. And so I take 30 years of military experience and try to use those things that a lot of people invested and taught me. And so that's where I think, and our program is, you bring young people together that have experienced similar trauma. Like, yeah, there's just goodness that happens. Um, if I use my own experience, right? There's goodness that happens for me to sit around and talk with 5 other amputees. Like, hey, how do you do this? And how, what about this? And nobody else can be in that conversation because you don't know. And it's the same with these young people. So you bring kids together that they may not be a part of the military community anymore, or they get disconnected because they've lost that parent. But we can bring kids together, and they can understand that they can understand each other, they can help each other, and then add in that part I talked about with character and leadership. If I can help a young person to make a career choice, to better their life, to work through some of the things they're dealing with the loss of a parent, go down the list. That's time well spent. And I think we owe it to the families of people who, um, service is a family business, right? Whether it's law enforcement. By the way, we serve law enforcement children too, but service is a family business. And whether a child likes it or not, they're part of it. And then when bad things happen, that sacrifice is shared. So I feel like we owe it to the families, and I feel like we owe it to the loved one who lost their life. Like, let's do our part. And give these kids world-class opportunities to develop into better people. Um, and perhaps some of the trauma they felt, help them have some healing along the way. Those things are wins. And I'll do that as long as I'm able.
When you make that first initial talk, however you want to put it, with these people, what is it that you say?
I honestly, DJ, I don't focus on I don't focus on their loss. Um, and I remind people, like, I'm a soldier. I'm not like a psychologist or a
Right.
psychiatrist, right? Like
Right.
I and I don't pretend to be. I don't play one on TV either. So I I do think sometimes my leg, oddly enough, allows me to talk about adversity and, like, I will not be defined by this thing, and you shouldn't be either. And uh, bad things happen. I got it. Life's not fair, but we get a choice of what we're going to do with that hand that we're dealt. And so that's a lot of the message. And why does integrity matter? Why does a life of discipline matter? Why does service matter? Like, those really important ingredients that um, I think tie into what their dads did, just, as well. What was important to your dad and what can be important to you. So those are definitely things we talk about early and often.
So, other than this organization, what do you think you have planned for this next chapter? I don't see you slowing down. Is it more of, just finding that next adventure? Is it writing a book? What is it?
I have 4 grandkids now, so I really want to be a part of their lives. Um, I I am looking at perhaps doing some programs for troubled youth, and same kind of theme of really making young, godly men who are people of character. So, no, I think I'll slow down a little bit, but still keep myself busy. And for me, I need to do something that still has has some value. What I think is some value to it, and it's not. I'm not interested in the world of profits and losses and business. That doesn't excite me. Like, I don't need money to be wealthy. I just need to wake up and go, okay, like, what I'm doing today matters. So that's what'll make me tick.
So let's talk about where people can find you. And that's any kind of social media, any kind of website, the organization's website. But I want people to be able to get in touch with you about these programs, because I think that there's a lot of different programs out there, but they all don't do exactly what they're supposed to do. There's a lot of, misconceptions out there about these organizations. And I really want them to get in touch with you about yours, because every guy that's ever talked to you has said nothing but great things about the organization.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. We do have a website. It is gstadventures.org. That's an easy way to reach me. We're as far as who works for the organization, we're really, really small. It's like me and my wife, and we have one other Gold Star mom that works with us. That's it. We run the show. So we're very easy to get a hold of, and yeah, would be more than happy to talk to somebody who'd want to learn more about our programs.
Any kind of social media, you don't have like that other Green Beret colonel that has the Instagram dancing Instagram or anything like that, right?
No, I do not. I do not have. I do have social media for our foundation, but I personally don't have any social media. And yes, I do know who you're talking about. I haven't figured that one out yet.
I don't know how that guy's still around. I haven't figured that out yet.
I don't either. I don't either.
I don't know how people under his command, if he does have command, how they take him seriously, because I don't know. I just don't understand it at all. So it makes zero sense to me.
Yeah, it pops up in my feed once in a while, and I can't explain it.
All right, man. I'm so happy you came on here, man. You're such an inspiration, and I'm so glad that we finally got to get together on this. Your story is truly amazing, and I'm absolutely honored that you were here. Guys, you know where you can find Kent. Let's talk about where you can find me. As always, you can find me on Instagram at the DTD_podcast. You can find me on Facebook at the DTD podcast, and you can find me on YouTube, where all these conversations, they're in video form at the DTD podcast, Dynamic Tales Delivered. Make sure if you like what we're doing, you share, like, subscribe, you be a friend, tell a friend, all of those things that I tell you every week. We're really trying to get the subscribers up. We want to cross 10,000 before the end of the year. So anything you can do to help out, that would be fabulous. Let's talk about the guys that make this show happen. My buddy Hoot over at Nomadic Research, nomadicresearch.com. I wear the shirts every week. I wear the hats. They're hanging behind me. I just used their bags on a trip that I took. All of their gear is absolutely incredible. Hats, hoodies, shirts, bags, anything you can think of. Go bags, anything like that. They have it there at Nomadic Research. If you get a hold of me, we can find you a discount for some of your stuff that you get there, but make sure you go check them out. That's Kent. I'm DJ. This has been the show. We'll catch you guys on the next one. See you later. This episode brought to you by Nomadic Research, built for the wild and forged in adversity. Somewhere between the front lines and the firelight, a vision was born. The founders of Nomadic Research spent years in the harshest environments on Earth, where grit and resilience weren't just words, but a way of life. They saw a need for gear that could handle anything. Gear that wasn't just built, but built to last. From battlefields to backcountry trails, every piece of Nomadic Research gear is designed with one mission: unyielding performance for those who refuse to quit. The founders believe in patriotism, personal responsibility, and the freedom of the great outdoors, because adventure isn't just a weekend escape, it's a way of life. Born in the heart of Afghanistan, forged in adversity, and built for the wild, Nomadic Research is gear for those who go further. You can start your adventure at nomadicresearch.com.